Pencil Kings, 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 Pencil Kings. So easy. The information we have access to nowadays to help teach ourselves is incredible that's out there.
We are back, and this is the Pencil Kings podcast. Now, before we start, I want to just tell you guys that a few episodes ago, we were talking about setting up a Patreon account to help fund this podcast because it's just, we need help getting the production values higher. And if we can get enough support, we'd also like to do more episodes for you guys. So if you're interested, go over to Patreon, search Pencil Kings, and you'll find the details for Patreon. So that out of the way, today I want to welcome Brian Blasiak to the call. And just looking at Brian's resume, I was, I feel like my jaw hit the floor a little bit. So Brian, why don't you give people just a 10-second overview of what you do, and then we can talk about some of the projects you worked on and get really into the meat of your story.
Sure, Mitch. I'm actually a lighting and compositing technical director, and that usually happens during the post-production phase of either animated features or live-action features. And pretty much what I do is I'm responsible for setting up cameras. So if you see someone take like a photograph with a camera outdoors or a camera that's taken on set, we kind of do that inside the computer. So I'll lay out cameras inside the computer and then pretty much try to light the scene. So there might be a scene set up, either it's based off a live action scene that was shot already or completely done in the computer. And we'll try to either integrate, if it's for a fully animated feature, it's basically based on the art direction. So the art director might create sketches or photos that we're supposed to match to get a basis for the look and the feel of the scene. Or if it's a live action film, we're going to want to try to light the scene towards the plate. So that's one part of the process, is setting up the lights and trying to integrate something that's generated in the computer and with the real world. And compositing is more of that aspect of making everything look seamless, like it's blending in together. So it might be taking a bunch of layers of either a background layer or foreground characters or a matte painting of a sky. And it's pretty much layering all those elements on top of each other, one by one, like how you might do in Photoshop, but doing it in an animation sense. So when we composite all those layers together, it creates a seamless image that's integrated.
Perfect. And I guess, like, for me, one of the things that I'm really impressed by, and I guess your own personal take on it changes over time. Once you've worked on a lot of projects, it's kind of just becomes second nature. But are you cool if I just read off some of the titles from your resume of the movies that you've worked on?
Yeah, sure. That'd be great.
Okay, so I'm just reading from the top here. So we've got Amazing Spider-Man, Avatar, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Legend of the Guardians, Amazing Spider-Man 2, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2, Assassin's Creed Unity, Smurfs 2, and I know it just goes on your actual website. Like, that's super impressive.
Thank you.
Is it just that, do you feel once you're at a certain level, you're only working on high-profile projects, or because I feel like this is the kind of resume that people would just kill for. And once you have it, all of a sudden a lot of doors are open. Even if you just have one of these titles on your resume, I feel like a lot of doors open for you.
It definitely helps, especially because getting started, there's always that catch-22 when you're coming out of school and people want you to have professional experience, yet at the same time, like, I just got out of school, can you give me a shot? So it's really, if you get one studio or one big name and you get your foot in the door, then things hopefully flow if you try to do a good job and then excel in that. And just the right opportunities too. You got, you always can, whenever a movie is being made, usually you might hear from someone, oh, this is going to be done at this time. And then you say, well, how do I get into that? And you try to network, create a close group of connection of friends and people around. So, when movies are being done, and then, contact recruiters and figure out, hey, might be something I'm interested in. Are you guys looking to hire at this point? And then especially if you're passionate about a certain franchise or certain thing, whether it's like Spider-Man or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and be like, oh, when's that being done? Oh, I looked online, I saw they're filming over here. And if you do some Google and research, you might be able to tell the timeline of when something's going to be coming into the post-production phase. So you can sort of do that if you don't have the necessary context and just do a little Google search.
Right.
Nowadays with the media, with Twitter, social media, you can probably find out and get a little bit better understanding of maybe this is going to be done around this time. So they just had the D23 Expo in Disney. So of course they're announcing some of the new Star Wars movies coming out. So you're like, oh, they announced this new Rogue movie. It's supposed to come out next summer. So you plan, okay, they might be doing the visuals maybe a year or 8 months before that. How do I get onto that? And then, go from there.
That's so, like you're saying it like it's old hat, but to me, this is revolutionary. And I'm sure to somebody listening is the idea of just, looking up stuff and then backtracking a little bit. And, you have an idea of how big of a production it is. And then you can say, okay, 8 months or a year. That's freaking amazing. And then you can pretty much pick the projects that you want to be working on.
Yeah,
so
you
cool.
go right on LinkedIn and find the company or the studio that might be doing it. I mean, this is for someone that, of course, maybe coming out of school, they don't have those industry connections. Because after you start working at these big studios, the people that are in there or producers or supervisors. And then, when you start, going around and jumping around, it does get to the point usually where you'll get contacted and you won't necessarily have to go out anymore. But that's just another way to, if you want to, be proactive and go, finding something you really want to work on. So for example, the new Avatar movies, if you just keep reading stuff online, you're like, oh, well, James Cameron's pushing the movies now a couple extra years. He's still writing the script. They're not going to be done till 2016, 17. So, well, when should I go and look on Weta's site to find out when they're going to be hiring? It's probably going to be a good amount of time in advance, but you can get a general idea of the ballpark and maybe when you can start pinging in those companies if you want to work on those films.
Oh, I love that. I love when we can take something that's maybe there's like confusion or uncertainty and then just like really harness it down. It's like, no, here, pay attention to this, minus these dates, find these certain people, these production companies, and then you're good to go. That's awesome. Now, I'm curious about, because your resume is amazing, but you didn't start in Los Angeles. So I'm guessing you've been in doing visual effects for quite a while now. But where did you start? You didn't actually start in Los Angeles, did you?
No, the first I guess, job in sort of the industry was at a place called Fisher-Price, which most people have probably heard of. It's a toy company for kids, and they're based out of East Aurora, New York. So I grew up in Buffalo, and East Aurora is about 20 minutes outside of Buffalo. And I did an internship there, and that was probably the first thing. Out of school, I was still finishing up my graduate degree, but they had a nice internship program. So we would do little animation spots for the toys. They would scan in the toys into their computers, and we would be able to animate those and then have a little sort of story play along, and then they would be put in some of the stores, whether it's Target or Walmart or whatever they were trying to advertise. And that was probably the first thing. It was almost like a jack of all trades sort of position where, and usually when you get into the industry, you're more specialized and you're doing one sort of job. But there you could do some modeling, you could do texturing, and you can do lighting. And that was probably the first sort of position into the real world of production.
But, Brian, when I was looking at your on your website, it was saying that you graduated with a computer science degree. Is that correct?
I started off...
Or information technology. I think that's what it was actually
correct.
called.
Actually, it's funny. I think a lot of people, they go to college and they think what they want to do, and then they come out doing something completely different. And that was the case with me. I actually I wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I went to college. I really liked video games growing up. I wanted to be, I want to make video games. So I actually applied and got into RIT as a computer science major, and I did start off with that for the first year. And I got in there and I didn't have any programming experience. And a lot of the people seemed to already have experience in that field. And I'm sitting there in class and everyone, is in there excelling really well. And I would do okay. I would do really well on the homework assignments and the projects, not necessarily the tests, but I just felt everything was sort of behind the curtain. It wasn't. I felt like I wanted to do something more visual, where people would see the front end stuff, and not necessarily the back end of the programming aspect of it. So and then I transitioned. I realized after the first year, this really isn't for me. And at that time, I didn't really know about the movie thing. I didn't even know you could do visual effects for movies at that point. I was still like, oh, I want to get that direction where it's more visual. And then I go, oh, information technology. They had this undergrad program. And you can focus in, it's very broad, but you can focus in a lot of distinct little aspects. And mine was multimedia programming and web design and web animation. So I got into that and finished out my underdegree in that. And while I was doing my underdegree in that, there was movies that were coming out like The Lord of the Rings and the first Spider-Man movie. And I've always sort of noticed this back when I was young and growing up watching the Star Wars movies and Jurassic Park. And I've taken animation like history classes and seen the turning points of animation during like Terminator 2 in the mid 90s area, early 90s, and just like fascinated and didn't realize that people did this for a job and got paid for it. And it was really, really cool. So just one of the actually professors that was at RIT, Dwayne Pelka was his name, was really great. He was actually pretty inspirational. He was in the time, he actually taught the film class or history of animation. And he was in that time period, and he went to school with John Lasseter and Ed Catmull and all the guys, the really famous guys back that started back at the University of Utah some ages ago. So he had these personal stories to tell during class. And it's funny, he's teaching a history of animation class, and he was there in that history, like living it. So it was so fascinating. I actually took the class and then went back and was a TA for him. So I got to learn a lot. And he also worked up at ILM in San Francisco, and he worked on the Mask movie, I think in 1995, and then Casper. So he was the only one at our college that had the professional experience. So I did talk to him, and he was my first sort of connection to figure out how do I get in the industry, what do I do, what classes should I take, and then I found out they had a master's program at the same college for computer animation. It was film and video / animation, so it was something where we would learn to shoot with old Bolex cameras, like windable cameras up, I think 8mm, 16mm cameras. And we spliced the film together. And then we'd, really old school way of figuring out how to do it. I remember some of my projects got screwed up because of the film got exposed to the light and everything got tarnished. And it was a fun experience though. But we would do that. And half of it was doing video production and then stuff in the computer. And then I started off with using Maya. I think it was Maya 2.0, maybe even 1.0 was really early versions of the software, just starting in the animation classes in there. And then I finished up my program, and that was pretty much how I found out about it, and then transferred from computer science all the way into doing what I'm doing now.
That's very cool. And I think actually that computer science background doesn't actually hurt you, I don't think. I think it's actually it's one of the things that really sets people apart is when they have that technical background, because there's so many people that don't. And I feel like that as well opens a lot of doors for if you know even just a little bit of scripting or programming, it can go a long way, because a lot of other people don't have it. I could be totally wrong. My information's a little bit old, but that's still my feeling that this is the case.
You're definitely correct, Mitch. That was what I used to get my foot into the door pretty much. Having that programming background, because I finished, I thought when I finished my thesis program, my film, I thought animation was my best sort of strength, but it was more difficult for me to try to get my foot in the door as an animator right out of school than doing something which I ended up doing for a first job, which was an assistant technical director. So that was more, assistant technical director is sort of a fine line. You're doing a lot of technical stuff in terms of some artistic stuff, which might involve some sort of scripting. So my first job out of school when I came out to California was that position title where I was doing stereo work, and it was for the movie Beowulf, and it was 3D, and it was purely technical, not very much artistic involved in it, but having the interview and saying, hey, I can do programming, I can do meld scripting, I have this background. And I heard from people that were in the industry that you go, that's a really good way to get your foot in the door as a technical director, because they're usually little more technical positions or a combination. And then if you teeter off and I just want to do more of a purely artistic role or compositing or lighting, you can branch off and do that, or you can go and be it's a little misleading, the position title, because at some companies technical director is just purely programming, and where other companies at Sony technical director might be lighting or compositing. But it's definitely a good way to get your foot in the door, and then you can branch off either into a purely technical role or a more artistic role if that's the way the path leads you.
Yeah, and you're actually the second person. The last interview that we did with Kelly, she got in through more or less the same way at Weta as an assistant technical director, if I remember correctly. Now, can you just tell people a little bit about what you actually did in that role? Because, I feel like it's going the technical route or adding some technical skills to your repertoire is a good way to get your foot in the door. But what did you actually end up doing?
So I guess maybe some of the better examples. I also was I think the second job I was at Sony. Now Sony's job was the one to get the foot in the door, and it was only a 2-month position, so it wasn't that long. But that's all it takes. Is if you can get one big studio and it's even for 2 months, that's enough. So I was able to get into Disney feature animation after that and work up there for about a year. And that was the same sort of position. I think it was assistant technical director, which more or less was similar. And I was doing 3D conversion, or not actually for animated. We would render, the left eye and the right eye of a camera. I won't get into too many technical aspects of that, but it was pretty much doing stereo work for Bolt. But on top of that, we were using the Maya software, which is 3D software program. And some of the stuff we would have to do, or I would do, is for my programming experience, was set up some Mel scripts, and we would use some custom code that would be like you can use for drop downs. And they're called plugins. There's people probably heard of plugins for your browser. There's plugins for Maya that we can use that might be proprietary or stuff custom to the studio. And I was working with RenderMan too, and I would pretty much set up those scripts that the artists could use on the show to easily assemble templates, possibly to set up their lighting rig. And in Bolt, for example, they had a rhino ball. If people have seen the movie, there's a ball that this character, little hamster character, runs around in, this little wheel ball. And it was too expensive for us to do the refraction and reflection and the ray tracing for that in the background. So one of the artists at Disney actually had the code. His name was Lewis. And I forgot Lewis's last name, Siegel. He was a brilliant, genius guy. And he set this whole thing up to, I'm going to fake this reflections. Pretty much when you look at, you're looking at a glass filled with water and you see how the light sort of bends through there and that's pretty much that effect. And he had this great way of faking it. And he goes, this is what has to be done. And it was a little bit sort of it wasn't the easiest sort of thing. But we had to make it easier for the artist to just hit a button pretty much. And then it would drop down a template of everything sort of set up in the script and the compositing script so they can put everything together with ease. So things like that were kind of automating some processes for the artist to use to make their lives easier, because some of the artists might not be that technical, and you want them to have be able to not worry about technical aspects and use their artistic creativeness to do whatever they need. So I was pretty much there to help set up some of those sort of things.
Yeah, and the thing about that too that I think is really cool is that this programming, even though you went to university and studied for a year-ish or so, it's actually not that hard to start doing like some beginner scripting in these programs. So if you're listening here and you're thinking, hey, I wonder what that would be all about, it's like just go read some beginner tutorials on it, and then there'll be like a little console that you can pop up in your software, and then it pretty much is just copying the actions as you do them in the software. And this can be the beginnings of something more complex. Same thing in Photoshop. I know Photoshop, of course, is a lot less complex, but you do have a programming language inside Photoshop as well if you wanted to go that route. And there are, believe it or not, there are positions for people to program Photoshop tools in like video game studios or film studios. And but at the simple end of things, you can still set up your actions and see it just will, every stroke that you do or when you're organizing your layers, it'll keep track of that stuff. And I encourage you to take a look and see what you can automate, because even if it's like setting up your scene and you always know, like, okay, I always work on a canvas that's 2,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels. And you can make a little button that does that. And then, that could be the start of something, maybe the start of a career,
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I think they're called macro scripts. It's almost an encapsulation of actions of commands where if you're doing them all the time, you might as well be the most efficient and to do that. And the thing about, I was at a wedding last weekend and someone asked me to do a wedding logo. And I think it was in After Effects and combination of Photoshop and some software I haven't used in a while. And I just went, how do I do this effect here? I'll just go on YouTube and look for it. And it's so easy. The information we have access to nowadays to help teach ourselves is incredible that's out there with the internet and the social media type venues of videos available to us. So it's just great to have that there and like, oh, how do I do this? Well, I'll just go look it up, and you can teach yourself that way too, all, along with the books online.
Yeah, it really is an amazing time. I remember when we started Pencil Kings, the whole idea was like, I remember there was this little kid who's me basically when I'm 7 or 8 years old, wanting to work on video games and having nowhere to turn to, no internet, no anything, and I just had a paper and a pencil, and I started making my video game designs, my video game characters. And now, things have come full circle, and we actually have the ability to connect all these people together and help them. So it's really, it's a fantastic time that we live in. Now, I'm curious, Brian, what does life look like for you now? You're obviously you're established in the industry. I see that you're starting to do some travel. You're starting to pick the projects that you want to work on. What gets you excited? What keeps the fire burning for you? Because I feel for me, I got to the point where I was getting burnt out doing video games. I didn't feel a whole lot of passion, and I wasn't seeing a whole lot of passion around me. And that just could have been the lens that I was looking at the world through at the time. But for you, and just hearing in your voice, you sound like a very passionate guy. Like I feel from hearing you speak that you're doing exactly what you're meant to be doing at this point in time, and you're enjoying the ride.
Yeah, I definitely, correct. I still enjoy what I do. Some projects can get frustrating, depending on, for any sort of position, but you have that love that this is the reason why you got into it. And there's always certain aspects of your job. And I enjoy actually, like, I like going to work, it's cool. I know there's long hours in the industry, but it's always fun. I was up in, just like last September, I tried to go to new places that I've always wanted to work. And one example was last summer, I went to Industrial Light and Magic, and that was one of the companies I've always wanted to work at. And I think it took, I want to say 4 times to get in, possibly, or I had 4 interviews before I got in. So just goes to show you, if you have an interview and you don't get accepted, don't give up. Just keep going and just apply again. They might want to wait a certain amount of time, but
So this was not it was not a 4-step interview process. It was like 4 separate times. So you tried to apply, and they're like, no, not right now. You tried again. No, not right now. Again. And then on the 4th time, they're like, yeah, come on, let's do this.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
The first time, I think it was maybe 18 or 9. I was really, really young and just getting, because Industrial Light and Magic are the guys that do the Star Wars movie, anything that Lucas or Spielberg has done, all those very inspirational movies that were the turning points. So it was just a big thing that I always a company I wanted to work for, and also with the talent there of all these people that have Oscars and these people you can learn from. And I think it was in my either early 20s or maybe it was 18 or 19. The first time I tried applying for an internship, and I remember I was in New York, and I don't even know if the internship was paid. It might have been like $6 an hour or something. And I was just trying to get in, and I would write cover letters and say, oh, I just grew up watching, and I was just so like, I love you, just hire me, I'll do whatever you want. And of course I got the little postcard in the mail, the light bulb, and then said, oh, sorry, we have a position for you this time, but try again. And then I think the next couple times I actually did finally started getting interviews, and I was a little intimidated because you have a phone call usually if you're not local, and you might be on the line with 6 supervisors and they're all asking questions. And I remember preparing for the interview diligently, and just like having notes and everything. Like, oh, they might ask me this, because sometimes it might, be technical, it might be artistic questions you're getting thrown in. It might be simple. They might, you never really know what's going to happen. But finally, I got my break, and I think it was a timing issue. I really think there was at that point where, again, sometimes shows really need help at certain amounts of time, and you contact them at the right time. And I was actually, hired to go up there as a compositor. I do a lot of lighting work, usually in the industry. It's still specialized. I still believe in sort of, it's good to be a little bit of a jack of all trades, because it gives you more options and more places to go to. So you can do more things if you focus on multiple areas. But I was up there as a compositor, and I got to work with some really inspirational sort of, just the company, just being that aura in there when you go in there. It really got me excited, and I didn't, I just wanted to do the best job possible. I was really worried, like, am I doing it? Like, this company's so cool, it's so great. I want to make sure I make the stuff look really good. And stuff like that, taking positions like that or jobs like that might, burn the fire inside, because it does. After a certain amount of time, it doesn't matter where you're at, you start getting a little burnt out. And usually it's probably due to long hours, not necessarily not enjoying what you're doing, but some places you can work really, really long hours and you're just exhausted. And you're like, I want to get my social life back. I want to go out and be able to see my friends and do that. So it's more of that, of trying to balance the work life sort of aspect of it. But it's just finding the projects, and also if you can know like the directors of films you're really inspired by, that helps peak too, like the motivation for really wanting to work on a certain project too. So I think you find what's inside of you, which really drives you, and then try to go to those aspects. For me, it might be a studio or a director, or the project, or if I see something on TV or a trailer and I'm like, wow, that looks really cool, I'm really pumped, and how can I work on that and do that? But the changing of the projects keeps things very interesting. If you're at the same studio all the time doing the same films, some people like that, to stability, and that's great. Actually, it's probably preferred nowadays too with the industry, but there's also that excitement to be able to travel and go around the world and work on cool projects too.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious, going back to the ILM story. So the first time, and I guess I want to ask this question for somebody that wants to take a similar path for you. Like, they know they want to work at Pixar, or they want to work at Disney, or they want to work at Blizzard, or they want to work on Assassin's Creed, whatever the thing is that they want to do. They know what that is. So they apply, and then the first time it's like not even a word, just a little postcard. But at least you got something. You knew that it was a no. It wasn't like you were left in limbo. So then you apply again the next time, and maybe this time it's a phone interview. But if you're getting turned down, or they're just saying like, no, it's not the right time, do they say that on the phone call? Do they call you back later? I feel like if we can mentally prepare people for some of the potential ways that they may be rejected, it demystifies it. And it's not like ILM comes and sends this really mean guy to your house and he punches you. And it's like, why did you waste our time? Because we build these weird stories up in our head and then we don't end up taking action. And it's all about, just pushing things forward, because it's not actually that scary. Like, if somebody says no, it doesn't mean you can never apply again. So I'm curious, how did it look when you got turned down? And then how did it look when you actually got accepted in on the fourth try?
Well, just to get, I don't know if they send postcards out still. That was a while ago, but just to have something like in the mail, I'm like, wow, it has their logo on it. That's so cool. I mean, just so that they like, wow, the force is with, like, I don't know. It's just like they have, they got my stuff. So that's at least a nice
you were
aspect.
Noticed.
But it doesn't, sometimes you just don't hear back. I mean, I know for being at bigger studios, they get pounded. They get a lot of resumes in sometimes, and they just don't have the time to respond to everyone. So I would not take any offense or feel discouraged if that happens. Sometimes just the load of stuff that's coming in, it'd be nice if everyone at least got a response. It's been about half and half. Sometimes I wouldn't hear. Sometimes I would just hear back, when you are available, or sorry, we already filled that position, or whatnot. But usually through email, if it's not, even if it is, actually nowadays, even if they want to make you an offer or they're interested in you, I usually hear through email. I don't usually ever get phone calls directly. I don't remember the last time anyone's ever actually given me a phone call. It's mostly through emails, or even possibly through some social media sites too, that they might find your information and then contact you through there to ask for availability too. And then there's great ways to post your information to say when you're available. So hopefully then it gets to the point, once you're established a little bit more and you put those feelers out, sometimes you'll just be getting contacted and asked when you're available. But I definitely would not be discouraged. And I would keep trying, because I especially if you have that passion, just go. You don't want to go crazy and apply like every week or whatever, or keep contacting. I wouldn't be to the persistence of annoying them. I would not do that. But I would improve if you're not accepted. I would try to improve your work. It could just be a timing issue again, but I would definitely wait a good amount of time, at least the next project, and then just do it again the same way. Or if you see a posting or you hear from somebody that knows there's an opening, it's also great if you have any sort of connection at a company, at least to have someone hand your stuff in for you. That's great, because then someone's going to see it, because you never really know when you're sending it just through their online website if anyone's going to look at it. But if you have someone in the company at least, say, hey, this person has, it has a little bit more merit to it coming from somebody in there. And I found that I've had that happen a couple times, and it's definitely helped too. So if you have that option, I would do that too.
Oh, this has been fantastic, because I love it when when a little tidbit, and it's so simple. I love it when there's something simple that really blows my mind. And for me, for this interview, was the whole issue of timing, and how you can demystify the timing of certain projects by just understanding how they work, when the final release date is, when they're finishing their shooting, who the production companies are, and probably all of this information is available online if you dig deep enough, or if you maybe send a few emails to somebody who might know. And I think if you're listening and you've been having trouble getting onto a project, start using this, because timing is so huge. When you mention that, I think back to when I started. It was totally a timing thing. And if it hadn't been the right time, they would have just said, like, no, you're not good enough. But because they needed people desperately, it didn't matter that I wasn't good enough, or I didn't think I was good enough, or whatever the case may be. They just needed somebody and who could run the software. And then they had faith that I would learn along the way, and I did. And everything worked out. So... And I don't know, this just applies to everything. Like, there's so many things in art that I'm realizing on this podcast that applies to like all areas of life. It doesn't just have to apply to art. So if you're listening, you're not an artist, you can try using this on somewhere else. And if you do, I would love to hear how you tested it out and how it worked out for you. So any last words before we wrap this up, Brian?
I just want to, again, to tell everyone, it's fun. It's a fun industry to be in. It can be a little crazy at times. It might not be the most stable at times, but if that's if you're passionate about that, if you have a passion to really want to work in whatever it is, an artistic, it doesn't have to be movies or film. It could be doing any sort of artistic photography, any sort of passion, drawing. You just keep going for it. If you have that drive, you're going to get in. And that was pretty much my whole essence. It took me a really long time. I mean, not a long time, but a lot of hard work and to try to get my first foot in the door. It was a lot of resumes, a lot of cover letters, and you just keep pushing, and eventually if you do that, that persistence will pay off in getting your first gig, and then you take it from there.
Yeah, definitely. Once you have that first, what was the name of your first big title on your resume? After Fisher, like Fisher Price is a brand name, but I imagine that there was a film project that once you say that to people, like, oh, okay.
Probably the Beowulf. Actually, Beowulf was done at Sony, but before that, when I came out because I didn't have a job when I moved out, I heard that you want to be where the work is. It's more difficult to try to find work in California if you are in New York. It might be a little bit easier nowadays with the global scale of things, saying, oh, I want to interview for a position in Vancouver, and can do it over the phone. But at least at that time, it was good to be in that location. And I remember I moved out without having a job. I had a certain amount of money available, and I said, oh, I have an undergrad degree. I can fall back on programming if this doesn't work out. And I almost ran out of money when I was out here, and I was coming down to like the last few dollars, and I was applying everywhere. And then I finally got a phone call from DreamWorks Animation, and they go, oh, we're going to be at SIGGRAPH, and we would like to interview you for a technical director position. And I like almost broke down like over the phone. I was calling my parents, and I was like, oh my God, because I haven't heard from anyone. I wasn't hearing from anybody at any time. And I was like, this was a big studio, and I was like, wow, They want. So even, I was ecstatic. And so I went and did the interview, and I realized that I didn't get the job, but I was just like rejuvenated with energy. Like, wow, if they got a hold of me, then this is possible. So it helped. That was one of the things that helped push me to keep going. And then I think it was literally like the next month and a half, the Sony position came up. So it was there was a posting online, and there was someone that I went to school with that worked there. And I said, hey, are they hiring now? He's like, yeah, get your stuff in. And it happened to be the right time. And they were willing to take the risk of someone straight out of school. And it was only a couple of months, but that's all it was. I would just say, don't worry about the length of the position, just to do anything, just to get that experience and then get your foot in the door. That's going to be probably a really good advice to go for.
Yeah, definitely. All All right. Well, that wraps us up. Where can people find you online, Brian? Where's the best places?
I have a website. I'm currently sort of trying to update that. It's a little bit old school. It's Flash, but it's on my name. It's all underscore. It's www.brianblasiak.com. I also have a LinkedIn account which I use and kind of keep up to date. And I have also a profile on Zerply, I believe, Zerply. So if you just Google my name, there's multiple ways to probably get a hold of me. But yeah, those are probably in Facebook too. I'm on there too. But any sort of social media site.
Perfect. And we'll have links to all of Brian's online properties as well at pencilkings.com/Brian Blasiak. So that'll be BRIAN-BLASIAK. And I guess I just want to throw out a plug for a website that I really like called Squarespace. So Brian just said that he wanted to redo his website. They're not a sponsor or anything like that, but I think it's a place where you can really easily get a website up and running. And I think it costs about $8 a month, and it'll look good on your phone. It'll look good on your computer and everything. So if you're in that boat where you need a website and you just can't be bothered hiring somebody, or you don't want to spend all the time to learn a bunch of stuff, there's some really great tools out there. Squarespace. There's a bunch of other ones too. You could type Squarespace versus, and then Google will show you a bunch of different competitors that you could choose one that works for you. So just a little tip at the end there. So thanks for listening, and we'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of the Pencil Kings podcast. Take care.
Scope demands patience, skill, years of practice.
Ah, you talk like a fool. I would trade a century of practice for an ounce of inspiration.